I'm Chance Marshall with UW Extension. For the next few minutes, we're going to talk about proper pesticide transportation, storage, and security. So when we talk about transportation, storage, and security, the first thing, as we've alluded to in past sections, is you should refer to the label. And on the label, there is a storage and disposal section that it gives you the details and exactly what to do with how to get rid of it, how to store it. All the information can be found, like other things, on the label. Make sure that you read the label first. Just an introduction on this section that serious accidents involving pesticides often occur during transit. Now, this is either during transportation or just moving from one place to another. And applicators can minimize the risk by being aware of their hazards and recognizing how to prevent any potential mishaps. So that's what this section is going to be addressing. The first part, I'll just talk about transportation. So the first thing you want to do is visual inspection. Most handling concerns can be solved with common sense. So begin by checking all the caps, plugs, sponges, anything that secures the containers in the vehicle or however you secure them during transit. Make sure to do that inspection before you go. And just some things to carry with you, labels and SDS sheets with you. And also spill kits in case there is a spill, and any placards if required by the label. You need to have that with you as well. I've mentioned a spill kit several times during the presentation. Here's a list of suggested items to include in a spill kit, whether in a shop situation or in your vehicle. The personal protective equipment, or PPE, applies to both your shop kit and your vehicle kit. There are many items on this list. Both lists include quantity of absorbent material. In addition, the amounts of absorbent material listed here, you should also include a box of clumping kitty litter. I'll share a video with you in just a bit that highlights why. Talk a little bit about loading and unloading. You want to be safe and sensible when loading and unloading. Don't be afraid to find assistance if needed. Now, a lot of times you're not going to be unloading a big barrel like the guys are in this picture, but maybe if it's just setting down a container or moving something, make sure to get help if you need it, and just do it as safely and slowly as possible to be sure not to have any issues. You want to handle all containers carefully. Don't drop them, toss them. You don't want to slide them across rough surfaces. Anything that could end up puncturing that container. A lot of these containers are plastic. You don't want to have them on any rough surfaces that could puncture that and cause a spill. You want to remove any cargo that could cause damage to the container, could tear or puncture. I know it's pretty common for folks to have a shovel in the back of their truck or a pitchfork, or nails or anything that could be in the bed of the truck that could cause that puncture, result in a spill. So remove anything that could damage the container that's around it. Here's the video that I mentioned.
I'm going to demonstrate how to plug a container. What we're going to do is we're going to drill a 1-inch hole in this 55-gallon drum. It has a lot of pressure on the water, so a lot of water is really going to be coming out. But with proper technique, you can still get it plugged. So first thing I'm going to do is put on my gloves. I've got some clumping kitty litter right here. And when you've got a hole this big, it takes a lot of kitty litter. So I'm going to kind of get it wet with the liquid and then make a ball. And you want to use quite a bit of kitty litter, like I said. And really apply a lot of pressure. And get ready to, because it may not hold, you may need more kitty litter. But the key is make a good sized ball and then apply it once it's saturated in the solution that's leaking, and apply it to the leak.
Always put on your PPE prior to attempting to fix a leak. It's pretty amazing how clumping kitty litter can seal a 1-inch hole or leak in a container. This is only a temporary fix that will allow you to get the situation under control and contained. You never want to transport chemicals in the cab of a vehicle. One, the fumes could potentially be harmful. And two, just the upholstery can be difficult to clean. In case that there is a spill, it could really be hard to get that out, and a potential exposure issue if you do have a spill. So it's a good idea to not carry them in the cab of the pickup and maybe in the back on the bed or secured somewhere outside of where you're riding. You always want to transport pesticides in a separate compartment from clothes, food, seed, fertilizer, livestock feed. I mean, it's pretty obvious things, but yeah, you want to not have any cross-contamination between these things. So keep them separated. Good idea just to have a place that is just for the pesticides in the vehicle that's away from all these things. You also want to secure them upright to ensure the containers don't fall or get knocked over. The truck bed should have walls or side rails. If you're going to be using a flatbed, you need to have that secured and strapped down. Usually things tend to migrate towards the front of the bed of a truck, so it's a good idea to keep things strapped forward if you can. And you don't want to leave the vehicle unattended with a pesticide, because if there is some accidental poisoning or exposure, you could be liable. So don't leave that unattended. You want to keep close track of that. You are responsible for what you're transporting. You want to protect your pesticide from extreme temperatures. If it's really hot or really cold outside, that could potentially damage the containers. That could also reduce the effectiveness or the usefulness of the pesticide. So if it gets really hot, that could change it to not work as well. So you want to protect from any extreme temperatures. Now, pesticide storage. You want to establish a suitable storage site that prevents exposure possibilities, site contamination, and damage to the products. So that's the goal if you're going to establish a suitable storage site. You want the site to be secure. You want to be able to lock it, post signs, make it so that you reduce your likelihood of liability. There's a few things that are really important with a good pesticide storage area. You always want to keep the chemical in the same container. You don't ever want to be moving pesticide from one container to another. Even if you just need a little bit of it, it's a good idea to always keep it in the original container. And you want to store it in places that are not easily accessible to children. That's why it's a good idea to have something that you can lock up, something that has a door on it, keep those kids and animals out. And also, the labels should be in plain sight. You shouldn't have to struggle to get to them. You want to be able to see them, whether they're on shelves or you can easily access the label so that you can read the instructions and you can read all of the important information of that on that container. The site should prevent water damage, avoid burst pipes, irrigation, rain, anything like that. Containers should be placed on shelves or pallets. It's a great idea to have your more toxic chemicals on the bottom shelf so that if you have a spill, it's not dripping down onto the other shelves. And if you look in the picture on the left-hand side, this is an example of a good storage area. And if you look at the containers, you can actually see the labels on a few of them. It's pretty accessible. There's enough room in there. There's good lighting. There's shelves. Whereas on the right side, they're just kind of all thrown into a shed. Kids could pretty easily get into there. You could easily have a spill and not even know what's happening. So an example of a good and a bad storage area. On this slide, you will see another picture of a good pesticide storage facility. This site is good because it's temperature controlled, well ventilated. Those are really important. And also just to make sure that you have adequate lighting. The adequate lighting is important so that you can tell if you have a spill. You can also read the labels. If you notice the floors are a non-porous area, that in the case of a spill would be pretty easy to clean up. You should also have clean water available. That's another important thing. And you might notice just the secondary containers that are on the shelves here. This is a good idea as well to help contain, if you notice that they're all sitting in separate little containers so that there is a spill or if there is a leak that happens in one of these, you're not contaminating things underneath it or nearby it. It'll be contained into that one little plastic container that could really help minimize that spill and minimize your cleanup. Store volatile products separately. Like I mentioned, you want to put the toxic items on the bottom shelf, not the top shelf, just so we don't get potentially more exposure just by a spill and it dripping down onto or falling down onto the lower areas. You want to separate disposal containers from the site. So you don't want to have just a collection of used containers in one area. We'll talk about how to dispose of those in a minute, but you want to keep an updated inventory and just consider the shelf life of your inventory. You don't want to have a bunch of partial containers at all possible. Plan it out so that you can keep the minimum in the area as you can. If you do need to get something else, or if you get another container, think about how much you're going to use, where you're going to use it, and then how much of it you're going to store. So talk a little bit about pesticide disposal. You want to try to avoid having excess pesticides, like I mentioned earlier. Carefully calculate the amount that you need. When you're done with it, the usual practice is to triple rinse or power wash before throwing away your pesticide containers. You want to check the label or consult with the dealer about disposal, but typically we can triple rinse, which means you want to rinse out the container at least 3 times. You want to pour your rinsate back into your spray tank. You don't want to pour it down the drain or just throw away the leftover pesticide and container into the trash can, as you want to pour that back into your spray tank and use that rinsate later on at the application site. Poke holes in that container and not reuse that container for other purposes. Another disposal consideration you might have is the weed and pest or the local landfill typically has disposal days. They can help you get rid of any leftover pesticides that you might have or containers. So for more information, contact your local weed and pest office or a landfill about potential disposal days in your area. A little bit about pesticide security. By providing security, you're safeguarding your employees and the community that's around you. You're also protecting yourself from theft, vandalism. It gives you a nice place to store and feel assured that you're not going to put anybody at risk and you're not going to have anything go missing. First step is to do a risk assessment of your vulnerabilities. Ask yourself that question. Make a list of your assets and what needs to be protected, what are the threats, and how do you address those. And also, you want to provide employee training, provide plenty of lighting and signage like we talked about earlier, and always reevaluate security measures and what can be improved to provide these things.